Hello and thanks for tuning in. This is yet another nerdy video about how you can hack your headlight of your Ducati Streetfighter 1098 or 848 so it will look the way it was supposed to look. So what we see here is my first attempt to put this smoke screen foil on top of the headlight, and then I'm using a Sharpie knife like this to cut this section out to reveal the LED eyes, so to speak. I haven't done it here. It's a bit crude because this was actually just an experiment. I was going to see how you did it. I didn't expect it to be that great. And as you can see, I was a little bit sloppy and there's some bubbles here. So the first thing you need to do is to remove the whole headlight unit. Well, let's pause just right there. In order to put the foil on, you do not actually need to remove the headlight unit. However, if you want to do the electric hack, then you need to remove it. Which is quite simple. First thing you need to do is to look underneath, and you will find two bolts there on each side, these two, which holds this lower bracket, that bracket here. See this one? Which is rubber suspended. So that's the first thing you do. On the top side you have these two hooks, and these two are hooked into these rubber suspended loops like that. So they're just hanging like two horns like that. And that's it, basically, to hold the whole headlight unit together. But of course you need to disconnect all these cables. And this one in particular has this peculiar locking mechanism, which I never really figured out fully. And since I pulled this apart a couple of times now, I ended up breaking this. It just snapped. And to be quite honest, that doesn't matter, because when you lock them together, it sits very firmly and it's not going anywhere. And same goes for this one. And then of course you have to disconnect the indicator lights as well. But that's it, and then off you go. Now, one hack that I figured out quite early on was that if you're changing the light bulb, I need both hands for this. So this thing is has a rubber seal to prevent water from coming in. It's just a simple turn lock, and then you find the light bulb here if you need to change it. But you see, if I turn this the right way, so you have three cables. One is gray there in the background, you have a red one, and you have this white one that feeds power to the low light. Now if you simply just pull this out of this sugar lump looking thing, I isolate it with some tape and then just tuck it away inside, just push it in there. That means that you have disconnected the low beam, and you only have the high beam and the LEDs left. I'll show you later what that looks like. So in order to do this hack, which I hopefully can do by myself, this is what you need. You need the smoke film, which you can get from automotive stores. I will put a link below there from what I got this from. And you need a heat gun, or probably a regular hair dryer is probably better because it doesn't get too hot. Scissors, obviously. And you need a Sharpie knife, and that's pretty much it, hopefully. So in order to do this a little bit more properly, I've opted to actually remove this carbon fiber cover. You don't really need to do that because you're gonna cut the foil exactly at this edge. So if you find that a little bit too tricky, I wouldn't go there because it doesn't make a huge difference, but I'm going to do it anyway. So you need to remove this one first. And it sits with two tiny little screws there in those holes. And you need a really long screwdriver, Allen key, to get to them. So you need something like this. This actually bends. And with a setup like this, it's easy. But if you don't have a very long one, then it's going to be tricky to get to them because they're so deeply ingressed into this carbon fiber bit that, by the way, doesn't weigh anything. This top section sits with 5 bolts, and then it comes off quite easily like that. This is also carbon fiber, of course. And then you end up with this naked headlight, and hopefully it's a little bit easier to wrap the foil around the edges here. Now, a little mistake that I noticed when I removed the test foil was that when I cut it with a Sharpie knife, I accidentally made a scratch there. Can you see it? I actually cut too heavily, too deep through the foil and onto the plastic cover here. So that was a shame. The key is to just put the knife on top of the foil and just carefully just cut like halfway through it, which is very delicate matter, or you will end up with a scratch like this, which is actually perfect in line with the edges here, so it's not the big deal, but you don't want to do that. So when you cut, just put a little bit of pressure, which is just enough to sort of create a little groove in the plastic film, and when you pull it, it will actually crack exactly there very nicely. Even better is if you have like a scalpel like this, which I tried at first, but I've ruined this. This is not as sharp as it looks, so I can't use it. But this would be even better if you can find one of those. Usually in paint shops, you know, where artists go, that's where you will find something like this. I was working with this. I discovered actually a few things. I discovered this bolt here. I just unscrewed it. It wasn't unscrewed like this. It's a regular steel bolt, and I've taken a lot of steps in order to swap all the steel bolts, original steel bolts, for either aluminium or titanium. Now that's a lot of money, which is probably quite wasteful considering that this bike is getting a little bit aged, but it's just a thing, and I've just kept on doing it. Whenever I found some bolts, I swapped them. So the whole bike is basically just aluminium and titanium bolts. Now, aluminium bolts, they are not half as strong as steel, obviously. So you can only put them in places where there's no tension, really. It's like fairings and places where there's no load to it, because if there's any load, you should not use aluminium. And to be quite honest, they're only meant to be used once. So you're supposed to tighten them with a certain torque, and that's it. If you unbolt them, you need to replace them. But in a case like this, and it doesn't really matter because this is just holding this cable clip, and that's it. So I'm going to attach the aluminium one and just leave it there forever, I suppose. So after a second attempt that went completely wrong, I managed to sort of get it pretty nice and tidy now at the third attempt. So if you do this, make sure that you have enough film to fail a couple of times, because you like me, won't get it perfect the first attempt. It's a bit finicky, and I realized that I could use a third hand or another person that would help me to heat the film as I was working with it. There are also some impurities. I don't know. I think it's because of me. It might be dust that gathered, you see here, like that. It could be the fact that the glass underneath, the acrylic glass underneath, is not perfectly smooth. Or it's just me. It's important that you try to keep the film as clean as possible on the sticky side, so you don't get dust trapped there as well, which was a problem in my second attempt. But overall, I'm pretty happy, and I think this is good enough. It looks pretty cool. So let's put it back. All right, so I put it back on and plugged in all the cables, and this is what it looks like. So it looks pretty cool. I think this is the way the Streetfighter was supposed to look from the very beginning. Now, what does it look like when we put the lights on? I'll switch them on. And this is what you got. So you get the LED eyes working, because I disconnected the low beam. But if you put on the high beam, guess what? It's still there. Now, obviously, it's not full power through the film, but it's pretty darn bright anyway. So if you want to make sure that you're visible, you just switch the high beam on. Otherwise, you're running like this. And this is very visible daytime as well, so I never had any problems. But before you do this hack, you should check with the local regulations if this is actually acceptable or not. And why would it? Because a lot of new bikes look exactly like this. So there you go. little smoke film on top here and disconnecting the low beam. See you next time.
Oops, I did it again. I played with your heart, got lost in the game. Oh, baby.